So first thing, it's very important to realize that when it comes to parshanut or understanding the Torah, everything after Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim et haaretz is a perush on what came before. Okay, it's sort of like, lehavdil. It's sort of like a movie that where as you're watching the movie and more things in the movie start happening, you end up understanding the things that came back that happened in the beginning of the movie a little bit differently. That everything that follows the previous thing isn't then informing the previous thing, and that's part of the reason why when we have Simchat Torah, we finish the Torah and then we don't even stop. We just go straight back to the beginning and we read the Torah, the same Torah every year, because when you think about it, it's not the same Torah every year. It's different, not only because you change and you have been changed from the Torah, but because the same words can mean different things. And we're going to see examples of ambiguous meanings, and that's really the openness for the parshan, for the commentator to step in anyway. By the way, anyone has questions, I can't see anyone's screen. I'm looking at a screen that looks exactly like yours. So just unmute yourself. I can't even see if you're writing in the chat. So unmute yourself and talk, and I'll do my best to answer any questions. So just to give clear examples of this idea that the Pesukim are constantly commenting on themselves. Take the most blatant one is when Eliezer is searching for a wife for Yitzchak, and to be most exact, Eved Avraham, it never says it's Eliezer, is searching for a wife for Yitzchak, and he, has the whole thing. He makes the Tanai, the condition that the woman who's going to come out and serve the camels, not only me, okay, that whole thing. The Torah gives a whole detailed story of that whole, account, and then, right when it's done, it goes and it talks about, he then tells that entire thing over to Rivka's family again. And it's different. So you already see that the Torah is telling you this is Eliezer's commentary on what really happened to him, and hence by the Torah detailing it, it's the Torah's commentary on what really happened. Obviously, Sefer Devarim is really, in a sense, a commentary or a reflection of a lot of the things that happened in the previous 4 books, right? Moshe is now rehashing it out. We have 2 sets of luchot, right? Are they a commentary on what came before? The Torah is constantly informing us about itself by just, having these nuances and then moving out from Torah and moving more into Nevi'im and Ketuvim. We have an entire Sefer Divrei Hayamim, which is constantly being analyzed in the context of, Shmuel, Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Bet, Melachim, and the Nevi'im Acharonim are also being, informing Divrei Hayamim and informing the Nevi'im, and they're all offering different perspectives. And so the job of a parshan is to figure out what is happening here. Why is the Torah writing it this way? And how to make sense of all this. And that's really where we move on to this side, where we have the difference between Perush HaMikra and Parshanut HaMikra. Perush HaMikra is what do the texts in front of me mean, right? Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Israel, v'yikru elecha fara aduma, right? It's actually daber el Aharon, v'yomar Hashem Moshe el Aharon, fine. But what does that mean? It means tell the people of Israel X, Y, and Z. It has a specific meaning. It's very simple, straightforward. Parshanut HaMikra is not what I'm just figuring out, okay, what does this mean? It means, okay, now that I know what the literal translation of this word means, A, what does it actually mean? Because sometimes the literal translation is not going to be acceptable. And B, what does it mean in the context of all the other Pesukim? And C, what does it mean in the context of the entire story that I'm reading, the entire book that I'm reading, the entire character that I'm analyzing, and how does that all work out? And that's where we move on to the next piece here, which is the 4 levels of, we'll call it, midrash, or understanding mikra, and that's the abbreviation pardes, which stands for pshat, which is, again, most people translate pshat as literal. We're going to see that that's not the accurate translation. Pshat, remez, so the simple meaning or the straightforward meaning, the remez, the hinted meaning, the drash, the meaning that you have to extract, and the sod is the mystical or Kabbalistic secret. And this is just 4 categories. Within each of these categories, there's, offshoots and offshoots. The last thing we have to talk about, and this is all part of our introduction, is we have to distinguish between comments made about the Torah and commentators. So the Rambam makes a lot of comments about Torah, right? In his Mishneh Torah, he quotes Pesukim all the time. In the Moreh Nevuchim, he quotes Pesukim all the time. throughout his writings, he's quoting Pesukim and commenting on them. But he never wrote a work that's a commentary on the Torah. And so a lot of times you'll see that Rambam will explain a pasuk in a certain context, in one vein, in a halachic vein, and then in a different work he uses the same pasuk and explains it differently. And if he was a parshan, if he was a commentator, he would not be able to do such a thing. He can't, unless he would have to say, I'm offering a different explanation now, but he can't just do it and close the book and expect his readers to be satisfied. But that's because he's not a commentator. He's offering comments about the Mikra, and part of his, he's using the Pesukim in a specific context for that purpose, and then in a different context, he's using it for that purpose. He's not telling you, this is what the pasuk means and only this. However, someone like the Ramban, who's a commentator, is going to want you to walk away from the pasuk saying, this is what the pasuk means. And he could offer multiple explanations, but each one of them is, this is what the pasuk means. And he has to, give you a sense of a totality in his work. It's a very subtle and fine distinction. As we learn more about the Mefarshim, the Ramban type Mefarshim who write works on the Mikra as independent works, we'll be able to see how it's very different than the Rambam's writing. The last part is that perhaps Ezra HaSofer is the first Parshan. We're going to look at Onkelos, who most of us assume to be the first to write a Perush on the Torah. But really, if this is from the Gemara and Megillah, but it's quoting Nehemiah, when the people come back and they read the Torah to the people, and it says, "Vayikre'u b'sefer Torah ha'Elohim meforash v'shum sechel v'yavinu b'mikra." So the Gemara is doresh vayikre'u b'sefer Torah ha'Elohim. That means that they read the Pesukim. Meforash. What does it mean when it says they read it and it was meforash, explained or clear? And that says that's Targum. That's the translation. So it could be that Ezra Sofer already back then, and we know this from the Rambam's halachot, that Ezra Sofer already instituted some level of explanation to the Mikra. It's not just enough to have words and text. You actually have explanation to it. The question is, why? Why do we need explanation to it? Why can't we just have text here? This is the book, figure it out. And it's very simple. It's not very complicated because language changes. The expressions we use change. The words we use change. And so the further and further away we get from the context that the Torah was given in, the language that the Torah was given in, the expressions that the Torah was given in, the harder it is to explain, right? To just take a very simple pasuk. This isn't even one of the most difficult pasukim in Torah, but a very simple pasuk, Vayikre'u, describing the food that fell from Shamayim. Vayikre'u b'nei Yisrael et shemo man, they called it man, and now it describes the man. V'hu kezera gad lavan v'ta'amo kesapichet b'dvash. And it was a white coriander seed, right? This is all already one of the explanations of what it is. But let's go with the most simple is a white coriander seed, and its taste was like a honey wafer. Now, what does that even mean? What does a wafer mean? What does a honey wafer mean? It's clear that when the Torah was written, this was something that was understandable. It was referencing. It would almost be like, if we were saying like, oh, that's like an Oreo, right? You tell anyone in the modern day, well, oh, that's like an Oreo. You would understand what it tastes like, what it's shaped like, what it looks like. Right? It's something that we can reference and know about. If you tell someone in 1700s, oh, it's like an Oreo, they'll look at you like you're crazy. So you need the commentary from someone, right? You need someone who has such an encyclopedic knowledge of the totality of Torah to begin to tell you, okay, I'll tell you what I think. Based on all the different descriptions we have of the man, based on all the different descriptions we have of what sapichet is, and devash is, and gad and lavan is, and all these, factors. And then you have mefarshim who come to the scene and say, now I could tell you what I think that the pasuk means. And that's how you get multiple interpretations, because the Torah text itself is open for interpretations. What I mean by that is that it's not written as a manual. It's not written as X, Y, Z, A, B, C. It's written, and there's nuances. There's no pesukim, no mitzvah is described in the same way in two places, right? Even in the 10 Commandments, it was written down on 10 Commandments, and it's written differently in the Torah's description in Shemot and in Vayet Hana, right? So how that is, how the Mefarshim, that's a very interesting point of difference amongst Mefarshim, was that Luchot Rishonot and Luchot Sheniyot is the second one's Moshe's Perush on the first one. Which one was actually written? Were there two sets? And then did they write them both? How does it work? That's a very interesting debate amongst the Mefarshim itself. But the fact is that the Torah text itself is open for interpretation. And that's how you get the idea of Shivim Panim Torah. Any questions up until now? Because now we're going to be moving on to Unkelus specifically. We're done with our introduction about Perush in general. Any questions up until now? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Good. So the first thing, I hope people are still here. The first thing we have to realize is that Unkelus is Targum Unkelus.
Edward, quick question.
Joe Abraham.
Very delayed.
From Izra Sofer until Unkelus, what was the commentary to the Torah?
Good. So we really don't know. On our next slide, we're going to talk about who Unkelus was when he possibly lived. We really don't know what was going on at that time. The Rambam writes in Hilchot Tefillah explicitly that Miyamot Ezra, they had what was called a Meturgeman. And what he did, was there a standard translation? Was there not a standard? My assumption is that there wasn't one standard translation. There were multiple translations out there. And when Unkelus came, and they were using multiple ones, and Unkelus's translation came out, and it sort of, hit the scene and took over, so to speak. And we'll see why. We're going to talk about what is so special about his translation. We'll talk about some of the things that are so special about his translation. But that's what we don't really have documentation, but according to the Rambam for sure, and it seems to be that was the prevalent already in the times of the Mishnah, Masechet Negillah, they talk about Meturgeman, cannot be Miktargem more than 3 Pesukim at one time, but if it's Nevi'im, you could do 3 Pesukim, right? It's already something that was regular. So it seems like this was where did they have Perushim? We know in the time of Chazal, they were Doresh Pesukim, which is a little bit different than being Mefaresh, right? So we're not really going to talk so much about Chazal because the Mefarshim that we're talking about already are using Chazal. So to answer your question, there's no clear answer. Sorry. Okay, so Targum Unkelus, okay? And the 2 left columns, we're going to talk about problems with translation, not just translation of Torah, although there it's more sensitive because you're translating from not only from languages, but you're translating from a language that's much older than the language you're translating into. Or if it's not even older, it's just the expressions are different. Unkelus, we're going to talk about him in the next slide when he lived, but he certainly didn't live within 1,000 years of the giving of the Torah, probably not even probably closer to 2,000 years. So he's 2,000 or 1,800 years away from the giving of the Torah, and he's translating the words. So let's start with problem number 1. Problem number 1 is when I have a word that has 2 meanings. Many times in English, in any language, you have a word that has 2 meanings. It has more of a base meaning, and then it branches out into 2 possible meanings. We see this right in the beginning of the Torah, describing men and women. They're naked. Veyushnehem aromim. Unkelus translates artilaim. Naked, very straightforward, not clothed. And yet the next pasuk says v'hanachash haya arum mikol hayat hasadeh. Arumim, arum. You would think Unkelus should say the snake was naked, but no. Here Unkelus says arum hakim. Okay, so imagine you didn't have the Torah. You just had the Unkelus translation. You would never know that the word describing arumim is the same, describing the status of man and his wife, is the same word describing the trickery of the snake. You would never know that those words are interrelated. That's one problem with translation. The same thing with the word boshesh, right? It's related to the word of busha, of embarrassment. And Unkelus just translates ahor, right? He delayed. You'll never know that the word has to do with that. It carries also that subtle meaning. The next problem is wordplay. We also see this very, we see this pretty much anytime someone is given a name. Like the second example is Moshe. Krashmo Moshe. Kimina mai meshitiu. Anyone reading the Hebrew sees Moshe meshitiu. Okay, nice. Again, that's a little bit of a tricky example there, but we'll put it because she didn't speak Hebrew, but we'll put that on the side. But Unkelus over there says Ukrat Shmei Moshe va'amarat min maya shechalte. And you read that and you say, okay, she's called Moshe because min maya shechalte. How is Moshe connected to the word shechalte? It makes no sense, right? Because it's not the original language. Again, going back to the first example, Lizoti kare isha kimi ish luko hazot. This is why he's called she's called woman because she's taken from man. Interestingly, in English, it keeps the sort of woman, man, right? It's much more close. Whereas in the Unkelus, ledayit kere itata aremi ba'ala nesiba da. Itata and ba'ala, there's no linguistic connection there, right? Why is she called itata if she's from ba'ala? I don't get it. But again, because you lose the original flavor, the original Hebrew. So that's problems that you're going to have with translation, and that's okay. We have to, we'll get back to that in a second. That's the price you have to pay. The second thing is, and we mentioned this before, is that every translation is commentary. This is something that's well known. Anytime you have a translation, you're already going to be commenting. And the reason for that is that because words, let's say you have a word that appears for the first time in Tanakh, or the only time in Torah, or it appears in different contexts and clearly has different meanings. So Unkelus has to pick what the possible translation is. Again, we see this very early. When Hashem speaks to Cain after he kills his mother, he says, if you are better, it will se'et. What does the word se'et mean? Mabarif. Unkelus says, if you don't improve your actions, it'll be left for you, it'll be gone for you. Ya'ani, your sin will go away, it'll be forgiven, basically. That's not the only, right? Seforno has a very different explanation of the word se'et. The Malbim has a completely different explanation of the word se'et. And so Unkelus, by translating one way, is telling you, this is my commentary on this story. That God told Cain that if you improve, you'll be forgiven. That's already telling you how to read the story. It's already a commentary. And if you see here, I have these two memrot from Chazal on the bottom in the blue, right? The one on the right is Bechet Betevet. This is from Megillah Ta'anit, the Megillah describing all the different fast days. And so it says on Chet Tevet, you have to fast because the Torah was written and translated into Greek. And there were 3 days of darkness that came to the world after the Torah was translated. So you already see the Chachamim are so sensitive to all the problems and all the disadvantages. Once you put the Torah into another language, you lose out on so much. These are just some of the problems. There's tons more. And we have a statement in Masechet Kiddushin, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Hamitargem, Pasuk Kesurato. If anyone just translates the Pasuk, completely literally, he's a foolish person. He's like trying to trick you. He's trying to say, this is what the Pasuk is. The Pasuk has so much more to offer than just one limited translation. So by definition, translating something, you're boxing it in. So now let's talk about who was Unkelus, and we're going to do this with every single parshan that we mentioned. We're going to do a very short bio because it's important to understand who they were as people. And the problem with Unkelus, by far, he will be the person we know the least about in all of our explorations because he's the oldest. And we really don't have much written about him. We have 3 statements about him in the Gemara. One is in Megillah, talking about, it just says, Rabbi Yirmiyah Vitem Rabbi Chia Barava Targum Shel Torah Unkelus Hager Amaro Mipi Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yoshua. Right, Unkelus, and we learned from here that he was a ger. The name Unkelus seems to indicate some not really a Jewish name. And we'll see who he was actually related to according to the Gemara in Gittin. Unkelus Hager Amaro Mipi Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yoshua. According to this, his tradition, his teachers were Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yoshua. Now, whether or not that means he was directly their students, or he was a student of their students, that we're going to have to see based on some of the other Gemarot. The Gemara on Avodah Zarah is a very fascinating Gemara. When he converted, the Kesar was very upset, and we'll see why based on the next Gemara, perhaps, sent legions to try and bring him back, bring him back to Rome. And every legion that was sent to him, he ended up converting them. And so that's finally he sends the Kesar, the Caesar sends him and says, don't talk to him. Don't let him open his mouth. Just grab him and take him back. And as the story goes, he's on his way back. And then they ask him, oh, what's that on the door? And he starts describing mezuzah. And they say, wow, what a beautiful religion. And then they end up converting as well. And then they finally say, all right, forget it. We're never going to get him back. That's the Gemara on Avodah Zarah. The Gemara on Gittin identifies Unkelus as being the nephew, right? So Unkelus bar Klonikus, bar Achte, he was the son of the daughter of Titus, of Titus, King Titus, who ends up destroying the Bet HaMikdash in the year 70. is the Onkelos was his nephew. So according to that Gemara, Onkelos is placed, can't be much later than the year 100 CE. So, Mipir Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua that we saw before is quite literal. He heard it from Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua directly. The only problem with identifying Onkelos completely and jumping in 100% with this identification is that Onkelos himself quotes Midrashim, which scholars usually date to the 4th century. Now, that doesn't mean that the Midrashim didn't exist before. So that becomes a little bit furry. And also, Onkelos is not mentioned in the Talmud Yerushalmi or in any of the Midrashim of the Tanaim, which you would think he would be if his Perush was, already out there. Now, could be that Onkelos, in fact, lived at that time. He wrote his Perush, but it wasn't widely circulated, and it also wasn't widely accepted. And maybe people didn't know it was his; they just knew it was one of the Targumim. But then later on, it got greater circulation. Again, these are things we really don't know. This isn't a class on the history of Onkelos and all that, so we're just mentioning it because it is important to know that it's not 100% clear when he lived, although it's very difficult to say he lived after, the year 300 or so, for maybe latest 400, because he's mentioned in the Gemara, these Gemarot that we saw, and those are already, the people that are speaking here lived at those times. So, okay. Now we're going to move into six characteristics of his Targum, and we're going to bring examples. And again, this is where, if you have any questions or you have any statements you want to add or whatever, please feel free. We're just going to really give a flavor for what his Targum is like for those who haven't learned it. So each one of these will get their own slide. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. How are we doing on time here? 9:30. Okay. So in general, the Targum of Onkelos is short and peshat. And again, we're going to stress this. Peshat doesn't necessarily mean literal. And again, when I say literal, I literally mean literal, meaning translating the words literally, without appreciating their context or anything. So let's just look at a very simple example. And with this example, we'll also be able to compare him to another Targum, Targum Yonatan, attributed to Yonatan ben Uziel. And it's on the pasuk, Vatere ha'isha ki tov ha'etz lema'achal. Now, if you read this pasuk, anyone that understands anything about the world knows that this pasuk is not really literal. I mean, it says, Vatere ha'isha ki tov ha'etz lema'achal. The woman saw that the tree was good to eat. You don't eat the tree, right? So everyone intuitively knows what it means. It doesn't mean she saw that the tree was good to eat, right? That the tree was good for food, right? It was good for food. It wasn't good to eat. It was good for food. That's Onkelos, just by changing one or two words, makes it so much easier to comprehend. And yet, Targum Yonatan, again, Targum, he's trying to offer a translation, is far, far more midrashic. It's far more, includes a lot of, esoteric midrashim that are a little bit far from the pshat. And he says, V'hamat itita, the woman perceived, Yat Samael malcha malach motata. She perceived Samael was the angel of death. From the words, Vatera Aisha kitov ha'etz l'macha. Again, very, very different styles. And it could be that this is why Targum Onkelos really has taken precedence over other Targumim, is because it's so straightforward, it's so easy to understand that it's shaveh l'chol nefesh. It's everyone could read it and understand what's going on. And again, this is an example where Onkelos makes a slight change to make the pshat. The pshat is not literal. It can't be understood literally. It doesn't make sense. And Onkelos helps us out. Perhaps what Onkelos is most famous for, and he's famous for it because of the Rambam, is his desire to, according to the Rambam, this was his most important goal, to remove anthropomorphisms from the descriptions of God. So a lot of times when the Torah uses the name of God to describe an action or to describe something that was done, Unkelus will replace God in the sentence with Shechinteh, his Shechinah, or Kivod Hashem, or Memad Hashem, his word, his speech. And here's an example from Parashat Noach. Vayizkor Hashem ba'ado, God closed the teva on his behalf, which translates Va'agen Hashem b'memre Alohi. And I intentionally put the words memre in parentheses because it's very important to know that there are many different girsaot in Unkelus. You see that in the next bullet point. Hold on one second. I need to get more water.
What's up, boys? You guys are allowed to talk. Right, Chada? Okay.
No, they're not allowed to talk.
I didn't know we're not allowed to talk. Who else we got? Who's Saul H? Introduce yourself.
Saul H. Saul
Which Hidayah? How are you? Not Sofer. Shomer. Shomer, if you don't respond, then we know that you probably went to the bathroom.
Chatting away, Bilderici.
Ed, I miss you, man. It's been a while.
I know. I wish I could see you. I can't. I don't know. I don't know how it works.
I'm in a dark room. My eyes are killing. I can't open them.
Okay, so just listen.
You could just hear me though. Don't worry.
Serenade you to sleep. Okay. Again, Hashem b'memre Alohi, God guarded or protected Noah with his word, right? And again, the parentheses there because in some gears out the word b'memre, which means with his word, is in there, and some it's not. In which case, right, whether that takes away one level of the anthropomorphism. One of the big controversies is because the Rambam, like I said, took this as Unkelus's goal. And Rabbi Moreh Nebuchim Aleph Kaf Zayin, he talks about one example where seemingly Unkelus, missed the boat, Kiviyachol, right? In Bereshit Mem Vav Dalet, when Yaakov is on his way down to Egypt after getting the news that Yosef is there, Pasuk says, Anochi ered imecha Mitzrayim. Yaakov has a nivu'ah, and the Pasuk says, Hashem tells him, I will go down with you to Egypt. Now, Unkelus should translate something like God's presence will be with you in Egypt, or the God's word will protect you in Egypt, or will go down with you in Egypt. But it can't be that God is going to go down. God doesn't go down anywhere. God's not physical. And nonetheless, Unkelus translates, Anna echot imach, I will go down with you. And that's a big problem for the Rambam. And he dedicates a whole chapter in the Moreh Nebuchim dealing with this translation on this piece. And he gives a couple of answers. One of them being, since it was in a nivu'ah, Unkelus was only bothered to get rid of anthropomorphism when it's something that is actually described as happening. Meaning to say, God himself describes himself in real time as saying, I am going to go down. But since this is what Yaakov perceived in his dream, it's not in his, nivu'ah, it's not actually what happened. So Unkelus doesn't care about, the associations there. That's answer number one. Answer number two is that since Yaakov himself, since he wasn't on the level of nivu'ah as Moshe Rabbeinu, no one was, and his entire level of prophecy is always via a malach, whether that malach is in the form of a dream or in the form of mashal. All these can be malachim in terms of the Rambam's understanding of nivu'ah. It's the malach that's talking here, not Hashem. Anochi ered imecha Mitzrayim is a malach speaking to Yaakov, and then the Unkelus has no trouble at all translating Ana echot imach. The Ramban on this pasuk takes the Rambam to task, and on this entire premise that was Unkelus's goal was to avoid anthropomorphization, and he argues at him. However, many have answered for the Rambam and really defend this as being Unkelus's real goal, and that's one example where there's a huge controversy on Unkelus, but this is one of the things he's probably most famous for because of the Rambam and the Moreh Nebuchim. The next thing which is often overlooked because it's people do Shnai Mikra and they just run through it. But this is very, very important in terms of the way to understand Pshat, is that he'll translate the meaning of the metaphor, not the metaphor itself. So just so we understand what a metaphor is. A metaphor is when I take something and I compare it to something else, and I don't mean for the comparison to be literal, okay? I don't mean when I say he's as fast as lightning, right? I don't mean to say he's actually like lightning in his speed. I mean to say he's very fast the same way lightning strikes up. You see it and it comes down very fast or whatever, right? So the question is, when I have a metaphor in the Torah, how do I translate the metaphor, or do I take what is meant by the metaphor and just take the meaning from that? And so here's one example, but he does this all over the place. Bnei Israel went out with outstretched hands. What does that mean? They left Mitzrayim like this, walking out with their hands over their head. What does that mean? And Unkelus says, I don't care what the pasuk says. I want to know what is meant by the metaphor. What's meant by the metaphor is that they went out brazenly. They went out openly. They went out without caring, without being nervous, without cowering and hiding. They went out brazenly. And that's what he says. They went out with an uncovered head, meaning to say we're not hiding from anyone. So Unkelus here takes the pasuk and says the pshat is not the pshat. The translation, the literal translation, is not what the pasuk is trying to convey. The metaphor is just the clothing. It's just the outer garment of what is actually inside. And the Rambam mentions this in the Moreh Nevuchim when he talks about, I wrote Moreh HaBochim, that's pretty bad. Moreh Nevuchim, when he talks about the role of analogies and at what level analogies have meaning. And this is a very important piece because a lot of times people just brush over it, but it is something to be very sensitive to because it happens all over the place. Next one is when there's poetry in the Torah, which happens pretty infrequently, but there are examples, right? Brachot of Yaakov to his children are very poetic. Az Yashir, obviously, Ha'azinu, and Balak's words. There's one other example in Bamidbar. He translates the poetry in terms of the prophetic fulfillment of it and not in terms of the literal translation. Okay, so just to do one minor example, but this is, and if you've studied Unkelus, you'll know that these are the 5 or 6 sections in the Torah where the Unkelus is so much longer than the actual pasuk. Usually, the Unkelus and the pasuk are matched up in the same amount of words. So if the pasuk is 8 words, Unkelus is going to be 8 or 9 words, right? You might throw a word in there or there to make it work in Aramaic, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward translation. This word means this word means that. However, when it comes to the Barachot and it comes to Az Yashir and all these things, he goes on a paragraph for every sentence. And so just to take one piece, right, in Yaakov's Barachat to Yehuda, he says, Osiri la gefen iro v'la soreka beri atono, right? Let your vines expand. I don't even know what the literal translation of these Pesukim are because no one really, let's see here, if we can find it. Here we go. Let your, and to the choicest vine, his she-donkey's child. Right? It doesn't even have a real meaning. To the choice vine, Osri la gefen, the best vine, his she-donkey's child. Soreka bani atono. Right? What does that even mean? So Unkelus translates, Yashar Yisrael lekirta, right? Israel will become wealthy in their cities, right? Amma, its nation, Yivnun Hechle, will build the Bet HaMikdash, that's Iro, right? Like the city, right? And Vlasoreka Beni Atono, Yehon Sadikaya Sechor Sechorle, and the righteous will be surrounding it. Again, how does Unkelus get from there to there? You have to understand that Unkelus's knowledge of all of Tanakh was encyclopedic. And so the fact that in one place or 2 places, Bnei Israel as a nation are compared to a Gefen, he takes Gefen and says that means Amma. And the Bnei is not from the word Ben, it's actually from the word build. And that's why he has Yivnun Hechle. And then all these are, what Unkelus is telling you is that poetry by definition is not meant to be taken translated. It's not meant to be translated as word for word. The message here is not at all what's written, right? It's not at all. When it says, kibes b'yayin levusho, you're going to wash your clothes in wine, that's not at all, not even on any level, what Yaakov was actually blessing Yehuda with, that he's going to take his shirt and dunk it in wine. That's not at all what it was. So Unkelus over there translates, right? It's not, has nothing to do with that. It has to do with wealth and abundance and all that. So that's another very important piece in Unkelus, is that when it comes to poetry, all bets are off. The entire, we're not even looking at we're looking at the words as clues for interpretation, but we're not looking at the words as symbols for direct translation. And again, just to go back to that, the question then is, right, we keep thinking that Unkelus is giving us Peshat, right? Is that Peshat now? Is that what the Pasuk means? At what level is it literal? What level is Pshat? What level is Pshat already a level of interpretation? Or is Pshat the literal meaning, right? That may be a question we'll address as when we get to Rashi, because Rashi has his own theory about what Pshat is. Unkelus never uses these terms. Pshat, Rashi just translates, right? Fine. Keep that in mind. The next thing is when Unkelus protects the sanctity of an object, or of really HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or things of the Mikdash, by changing translations of the same words. So we have a very straightforward example. When it comes to Noach building a Mizbeach, which was a holy Mizbeach, Vayarach Hashem Reach Nichoach, right? Hashem smells the meat. It was a beautiful korban. It says Unkelus Uvna Noach Madbecha. Very simple. Noach built a Mizbeach. However, when the Torah is describing that Bnei Israel have to enter into the land and destroy the Mizbechot of the Shiva Amamim, and it says, Ki et Mizbechotam titotzun, destroy their Mizbechot, Unkelus doesn't want anyone to think that Noach's Mizbeach, or kosher Mizbechot, or holy Mizbechot, are in any way in the same league as the Mizbechot of the Shiva Amamim. And so he uses actually a different word, Yak egorehen ta'arun, right? Egorehen is like a useless thing, like nothing, like a nothingness. To show you the difference, he translates the same word, Mizbeach, completely different translation. He does this also in a very important context with the word Elohim. When the word Elohim is being used to describe false gods, fake gods, instead of translating them as gods, I know this is where I just looked at the time. We're out of time. We have a couple more slides. So anyone that needs to leave can leave. Anyone that wants to stay for another 5 or 6 minutes, it'll be recorded. So feel no pressure. So when it comes to Lo yeh lecha Elohim acharim al panai, Unkelus translates dahala, which just means fear, right? Something that is feared. And he wants to stress the fact that these are not gods. These are things that just people fear them. And that's why they're considered gods, right? But they actually have no mamashut to them whatsoever. Okay. HALAVAH. That's a nice spelling mistake. Okay. He translates in accordance with halacha. Okay. So that's, you should say, okay, obviously, what else is he going to do? But the chidush here is that even when he has to add words that are not at all in the pasuk, Unkelus will throw it in there. So the most straightforward, the first example we have of this, the first law essentially in the Torah is shofech, well, not according to the Midrash, but it explicitly is, shofech adam ba'adam, damo yishafech. Someone who spills the blood of his friend, his blood should be spilled. Very, very straightforward. Doesn't tell you how his blood should be spilled, doesn't tell you what. Unkelus comes along and says, someone who spills the blood of his fellow, bisahadin, with witnesses, al memar dayana damei teshad. Based on the word of the dayan, he will be killed. Unkelus already puts in here that you need judges, you need witnesses. That's all already based on the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Unkelus is telling you that's what the pasuk here means. It doesn't mean someone who kills someone, now that guy is a free-for-all, anyone could just hack him to death. He's saying that's not what the pasuk means. He's not saying this is my interpretation. He's saying this is what the pasuk means. Look at the most important one. One of the most glaring ones is Lo tevashel gedi b'chalev imo. Do not cook a goat in its mother's milk. Unkelus lo techlum basar b'chalav. Don't eat meat and milk. Unkelus is telling you the Torah is not talking about cooking a goat in its mother's milk. That's not what the pasuk meant ever. It meant la techlum basar b'chalav. Now again, we have to discuss. Okay, Unkelus is saying this is what the pasuk means, but is that true? Meaning to say the Gemara will be doresh the significance of the fact that it's wrote it in Lo Tevashel Gedi B'Chalev Imo, to exclude chicken, to exclude all sorts of things that their mothers don't produce milk. So what did the Torah mean? And so if we just had unkelus, la techlum basar b'chalav, we wouldn't have that entire level of drash. So these are things important to keep in mind, that even though he's translating in accordance with the halakha, even the halakha is not telling you, is not blind, is not erasing what's written in the Torah. It's not, it might be interpreting it, but it's never losing what its original writing, what it's originally written. Conclusion. We have only one type of learning that is mandated by our Chachamim. They never told us what to learn. They only told us learn and divide up your learning, but they never told us you have to learn this, you have to learn this. There's one exception. Amar Rav Huna bar Yehuda amar Rabbi Ameh ve'olam yashlim adam parashiyotav im hasibur shnai mikra ve'echad targum. Person must always finish Parashat HaShavua, twice reading the Mikra and one time reading the Targum. And as is codified in Shulchan Aruch, Targum Unkulus is the standard Targum by which to fulfill this obligation. And so you have to ask yourself, right, was Unkulus successful in his project? And I think the answer is absolutely. Every standard printed Chumash out there has Targum Unkulus. Thousands of people are reading Targum Unkulus every single week. And so he is the base by which we even begin to have Parshanut. He is, we're going to move on to Rashi. And on every single page, Rashi says, Zet Targumon. He quotes Unkulus, right? Unkulus Tirgem Kach. He might agree, he might argue, but he is the base by which we have any level of Parshanut. And so we have to start off with him and we have to show him our appreciation. And I hope that learning about him will encourage more people to learn him. There are dozens of books written now on explaining, Unkelus and explaining, because we just scratched the surface here, but there's really a lot more. And so, thank you guys for joining, and God willing, we'll see you next time.